Okay, so I just read this book, and I have to say it has been one of the best, most gripping, emotional, heartbreaking, and hilarious books I've ever read, among the only two books I've ever read. The book was Mother Night by Kurt Vonnegut, and jokes aside, it was really good. If you're familiar with Vonnegut's style of writing, you'll immediately recognize Mother Night as being far more traditional than his usual intergalactic mind screwery. Instead, Vonnegut gets more philosophical than usual in Mother Night, posing questions such as what is the borderline between guilt and innocence, and is a man pretending to be a guilty man also guilty by correspondence? Mother Night is also the only book that Vonnegut has admittingly written with a clear moral to. We are what we pretend to be, so we must be careful about what we pretend to be. The book opens to an Israeli prison, to a Nazi propaganda artist awaiting war trials, recalling just how he got there. Despite the grim title and setting, the book is actually a very clever satire, rather than a dark, deep mystery novel. That being said, there are still plenty of mysteries to be had. The main character, for instance, Howard Campbell Jr., is introduced as a Nazi, but is later revealed to be an American national. His wife, who supposedly died 15 years before during the war, makes a sudden reappearance with a bunch of neo-Nazis who conveniently know where he lives. And his best friend, who seems to know way too much about his personal life than some random painter living downstairs should. Sadly, this is as far as I can get into the story without going through some heavy spoilers, so consider this the official spoiler alert. What do these three have in common? Well... As it turns out, Howard's wife and best friend were both Soviet agents tasked with taking him back to Moscow for him to be publicly shamed as a fascist Nazi. On the other hand, was never a Nazi to begin with, but he was actually a secret agent feeding information back to the United States. Now, the reason I said wife in air quotations is actually because his wife is actually his wife's little sister, who was posing as her just to get close to Howard Campbell. In another plot twist of events, the United States was actually aware of the entire Soviet espionage ring going on around Howard Campbell. They just chose not to intervene until they could see clearly where this was all headed. In another plot twist of events, the United States military does end up intervening, but only seconds after Howard's best friend and ex-wife's sister, now lover, decide that they want to defect from the Soviet Union and admit their plans to him, and want to live a happy life together somewhere far off in Mexico. This intervention leads to the arrest of his best friend and the actual death of his ex-wife's sister. This leaves one final question that needs to be answered, and that is, if the Americans didn't arrest Howard Campbell Jr., then how did he end up in an Israeli prison? It was actually Howard who turned himself in for war crimes. He had nothing left. He considered himself and made parallels to the prisoners of Auschwitz because they had nowhere to go. They could only follow orders at that point, and that order was to their death. Howard simply wanted somebody to tell him that he had to die. But to his own misfortune, the man who actually signed him on as an intelligence agent oh so long ago shows up in court to testify for him against the war crimes, and he is acquitted of all trial. But Howard didn't see this as just. Instead, he decided to take his own life if no one else would. The narrative structure of Mother Night is actually very postmodern, very much like the other works of Kurt Vonnegut. Another very Vonnegut touch to this book is all the use of satirical humor. I really didn't expect to laugh so much over a war story about the Holocaust. All in all, and despite my spoilers, if you like Vonnegut, if you like war books, or if you like books in general, you'll probably love Mother Night. Thanks for watching, and seriously, check out this book.